All right, we are here with a Bible study. I've done a few of these before and put on Facebook and have always wanted to have somebody to do them with. So, Mr. B-Rad Gaylor here, we're going to throw this together and do these about once a month, hopefully. See how they go. Might have special guests.
All right.
Might have, I can't call him by his nickname on Bible study, can I?
Stuck out.
Well, I was thinking your son, but
yeah. Get Elijah.
Yeah, we'll get Elijah to lead one. We'll get Stank Eye Gaskin to come lead one time, so or do something with us at one time. We'll just throw him to. We won't tell Adam before we get here. We'll just show up, and then when he gets here, we'll be like, "Hey, we were going to do a Bible study on the book of Amos, and we need you to lead it. Go ahead." Get him started like that. We'll throw him a good, or Leviticus. We'll say, we need you to go over all the laws.
Man, we'll get big Elijah. He'll jump in there, dude.
We'll say, Adam, we need you to talk about snake handling and pros and cons of handling snakes.
Man.
We'll throw him to the wolves. So, okay, we're going to do the parable of the sower. And which one you read? You did Matthew?
I remember Matthew.
Matthew chapter 13. Right.
We're just going to jump right in.
Yeah, I went through verse 9 there. I didn't go through where his disciples still didn't get it, and he had to break it down in proper King's English for them, tell them, hey, dummies, this is what I meant.
Right.
Which seemed like he spent a lot of time with them having to do that. Of course, I guess if I was there, he'd probably have the same thing.
Yeah, we're still doing that today.
Here's the parable. Here's what I'm trying to teach you. And then when you look at me and go, what? Here's what I really mean.
What exactly, when you think of a parable, what do you think?
I think kind of like when we give an example, I guess, and we use a story that's kind of a story, but kind of not a story. And it tells, and there's one, I don't know if you call it a parable or not, but there was one I read that kind of went with this parable of the sower. And after we read it and talk a minute, I'll tell you that story. It's a good one about a kid working on the farm with his granddad. Well, my phone's up there. I was going to say, I look on my phone and read it word for word. I had to pull it out of my pocket and see if I can figure it out. I'm not good at telling jokes and stories without looking at them half the time.
Yeah. The way I look at parable, it's just a heavenly story or an earthly story with a heavenly meaning.
Yeah.
The Greek word, I think it's parabole, and you can break it down into two different parts, but that's basically what it means. Something of heavenly significance, and then but we're tying it to something that we can actually associate with.
I think that's what Jesus taught in parables, because he knew what he is trying to say and what he's trying to teach. Not only is, like I said, heavenly, it's deep, it's spiritual, and we have the luxury, I guess, of looking and seeing the Old Testament and seeing where this prophecy was given here, and then thousands of years later, this prophecy was fulfilled. And they didn't have that luxury.
Right.
So, us simple-minded humans have to have it put in a simple-minded form. And, I guess, like I said, without that history and without having it right in front of us, well, we could read this parable every day our whole lives. They just heard it that very first time. But, I think we would probably be in the same, I know I would be in the same shoes if I was sitting there with Jesus, heard this prophecy or this parable straight out of his mouth for the first time. I'd probably be kind of cross-eyed too, like, what are you trying to tell?
Yeah. Is this one for me?
Yeah.
You look at the preacher, you preaching to me?
Yeah. You'd be looking behind you like, who else is here? That must be for them old Pharisees
back there white knuckle in the pew. That one's for them. You said you went through verse 9?
Yeah, I just went 1 through 9 when I was looking at it.
Okay. Starting chapter 13, Matthew 13, verse 1. It says, the same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow, and when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But others fell into the good ground and brought forth fruit, some an 100-fold, some 60, some 30-fold. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear.
Right. So we got 4 different groups, kind of, I guess, there that he's talking about. The thing that's kind of stuck out, well, there's 2 things that stuck out to me about this one. One, when I was looking at it last night, I'd never really thought of before, and one kind of went with the story. And the story that I had was, if I can remember it all correct, there was a granddad and his grandson, and they were going out, they were planting, and they planted the garden or whatever, and when it come time to reap the harvest, they went out there, and I don't know if it was corn, tomatoes, whatever it was, it doesn't matter, but was plucking, and the son or the grandson asked the granddad something like, we planted a lot more than this. Why is this all come up? And I'm horrible at telling the story, but anyway, to go full circle around real short, the granddad was like, we got to plant all the seeds to get some of the harvest. And the point of that was, and that was the point I'd always got before, was if you don't plant the seed, you're not going to get anything.
That's right.
So I think Jesus, to me, was telling them, look, hey, your job is to plant the seed, and then, some of it's going to fall on people who don't want to hear it. Some of it's going to fall on people who hear it. And I think that's the one that's, to me, the third one, I think. Or the second.
The second one are the ones that
stony places, yeah. Where it says they had not much earth. Yeah, it took root. Well, it didn't take root, but it sprouted like, did you ever in school plant like a butter bean in a cup?
Yeah.
And what's in the cup? It's growing and it's good, but eventually it's got to move from the cup to something bigger.
It's got to have something deeper so it can really develop some roots, or it's going to get torn up.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people now get the
you'll get people come in
emotional experience, and they're on fire until something tough comes up, or until as long as everything's going good and the church is going good, nobody's having any issues, they're all on fire. And then when it gets to the meat and bones and stuff, they kind of wither away. And I think you're gonna have that.
That's always
everywhere.
Absolutely. But I think part of it could be, I guess, really the parable of the sower, or it could be called the parable of the ground, because sometimes it's not the seed's fault at all. We can go out, I could go out and share, have good seed, and go out and it not take because the ground's messed up. Or I could go out into a spot that's got good fertile ground and go out maybe with I'm not all there. I'm not prayerfully going. I'm going with an ulterior motive, or I'm going for a check mark of I've done my evangelism for the week, or I haven't developed a relationship with that person, or maybe it's just not meant that I'm not the person that's going to reach them.
Right.
But sometimes it's also the seed. Whenever they were sowing seed, they didn't have the fancy equipment now that tilled the ground, and they broadcast the seed and just slung it. And that's why it kind of bounced. But if your seed wasn't preserved right, if it got too hot, too cold, it could kill the whole process. Before you ever put it in the ground, you can have a seed that's a dud and throwing it out. And a lot of times, if we're not prayerful with the Lord, we can be throwing out seeds that we think are good seeds in self size, whenever really they're coming from a wrong spot, or it's a dud. Or worse yet, someone sees the way that we live our lives.
Yeah,
they see how you or I live, or somebody else that claims to be a Christian live, and theologically we may be on point and have a good seed to throw, but they see us out at the bar drinking, cussing, hollering, acting ignorance, it doesn't matter how good of a seed, how good I can tell you about Scripture, tell you about Jesus and walk it through. That seed's going to be dead before it ever hits the ground because of my witness has already been damaged. So there's so many factors that go into, our personal ministry.
Well, I never thought until you said that about this could, instead of parable of the sower, you could really call it parable of the ground too, because the sower is just putting out the seed. The ground is the ground. I mean, we can go out here and plant in the backyard and we can do all kinds of stuff, but neither one of us can physically change what kind of dirt's in that backyard. Whatever's back there is back there. But when you talk about the parable of the ground, made me think of one of the Corinthians, I believe it's in 1st or 2nd Corinthians, where Paul talks about the body of Christ and how there's each part, and the hand can't get mad because it's not the foot because it's not the hand, and how all the parts are good together. And when you read this, it does. I never thought of this, but I mean, he's talking about the guys going out with seed and planting on this spot and planting on that spot, planting on this spot, and planting on that spot, but it doesn't say what's gone on before this. Right. He didn't just go out there and throw it on the ground. Somebody had come before and plowed the ground.
Yeah, they had done an effort to prepare the ground.
Yeah, and not all of us are going to be the seed sower. Not all of us are going to be the tiller. Not all of us are going to be the waterer. What do you say in one part? What Paul watered, or Apollos watered, and Paul, whichever one, whatever order that is, but God gave the increase.
Yes.
And that's like, there may be somebody that you and I know in common, and my job spiritually may be to work the heart and the ground to get it prepared, not necessarily to be the one to try to plant the seed, because that may be what God has for you, or vice versa. And that's like where, in team, there's no big I's and little U's. It takes all of us working together and being willing to do our part.
Absolutely.
Because it's not about who wins more to the Lord, Brad or Jeremy or the pastor or this church or that church. And I think church-wise, that's where individual churches where we fail a lot of time is, Central Baptist did this, and Rockledge Baptist did this, and the Methodist did this, and Whitesboro did this, and we're all going to the same heaven. Yeah, it's not like we win more, so we get the good back 40, and y'all get the swamp version over there because y'all didn't win as many to the Lord. We all have the same goal. Yeah. And I think that hurts us too when we plant seed, like you said, about individually having to live what we say, because it's easy to do it on Sundays or Wednesdays or in church or with our church family.
When the camera's on.
Yeah, when the camera's on. It's when the camera's off, or when you're at Walmart and you don't think anybody's looking. That's when people are really looking, because they're like, hey, there's Brad, he's a preacher. Let's see how he's going to respond when, the C team's down 40 points. Or, you know what I mean? But that's how the world looks at us, and they want to see that. And you can go bigger. That's how the church gets looked at too, is, when this church, the Baptist church, is fighting with the Methodist church, and then you got the one at home, right? Well, they're going to fight each other. Why?
Yeah. What? If they can't figure it out amongst themselves, and they're claiming to believe in the same God, and they argue and they split, and they'll build churches next to each other, why do they want any part of? I don't care if the sign says Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal. If it's between the binders of the book, if it's in the Bible, it doesn't matter. We can split hair on.
There's certain things we all have to believe: the virgin birth, the death, burial, resurrection, all those.
Yeah,
there's like a basic foundation, and then the rest. It even says that work out your own salvation if you're trembling.
Yeah, the core doctrine is pretty well the same, but we'll get so worked up over the gifts of the Spirit, right? Pentecostal speaking in tongues or whatever it is, that just people are very standoffish, and we don't need to. There's enough wedges between people in churches. There is. And there's enough people that have been church hurt, feelings hurt, whatever, that are just looking for a reason, oftentimes not to go, when all they really need is somebody to love them and encourage them.
And I think too, we look at, And it's easy to look in the Bible, especially the New Testament, the stories, and see where Jesus was telling the Pharisees, you're no better than your forefathers who came out of Egypt, and they saw all these great miracles. It was like, hey, do we not have enough graveyards in Egypt? Let's go back there. And was talking to them. But we fall into those same traps of traditions in churches. And that's what the Pharisees were doing. I mean, they're like, we're going to kill you, Jesus, because you healed a blind man on Sunday. How dare you do that on the Sabbath?
Right.
Well, that's what I came for, and I think we could all, especially me included, do a lot better to take from what Paul said over there. One place he was like, I forget which epistle it was in, but he told them, I came to hear Jesus Christ and him crucified. If you want to talk about, should I sprinkle, should I dunk? Or should we, have gluten-free crackers for communion or saltine crackers?
And wine or
it's what it represents. It's not, and we get tied up on all that stuff. And I guess that's human nature. Of course, it is. We live in a fallen creation, but we can hurt people if we're not careful.
The ability to hurt in a moment, in a word of anger, can carry years worth of damage behind. Like I could say something to you that maybe you've struggled with for years, and it pricks you to the heart, and it's something that you've struggled with for years, or the same for me. So it says that a brother offended is harder to win than a fortified city. So if we offend our brothers or sisters or those in our workplace, even if we don't mean to, it's harder to share Jesus with them and show the love and to win them over ultimately, to be a follower of Christ.
We have to be mindful of that, I think, when we're sowing the seed, because like all the ground's not the same. We've got the one with fowls, we got ground that's stony, we got ground that had thorns, and we got good ground, and it's not. And that was my first thought that I've never thought of when I read this before was, it talks about seeds and sowing, but the question that came to me yesterday was, where do we sow? And we don't get to pick and choose.
I feel like though as a church, we really do. Because evangelism, if you will, today, a lot of it's just come to church with me. And I've been guilty of that whenever I knew I should have shared Jesus with somebody on the spot,
right,
or shared my testimony. I've reduced down why don't you just come to church with me, Jeremy?
It's going to be easier for me to show you inside the four walls of the church than here inside the four walls of Walmart.
Yeah.
And I can see that
like we're
guilty of that.
Cherry pick the ground we want to sow. We want to sow behind the pulpit. We want the pastor so we'll drag them in, but we want whoever to preach to them or teach them. And that's not really how it is. We're all, whether you've been called to teach, preach, whatever it is, we are all called to ministry in one form or another.
That was in Matthew 28:19. I don't know if you've ever heard me tell this story, but back the year before COVID, we went on a missionary trip to Honduras. I'd never been on one before. Mm-hmm. And the guy that led the missionary trip usually went to Nicaragua. Nicaragua. But for whatever reason, they couldn't go to Nicaragua that year, so we went to Honduras. And the pastor of the church in Nicaragua that they used to work with come on a bus and met us there in Honduras. Mm-hmm. I never met this guy before, fell in love with him. He's an awesome guy. He actually passed away with COVID. Got COVID, passed away probably a little over a year ago now. But we would sit out at night in front of the mission house when we came back from doing whatever we did that day. We'd sit out in the men, we'd kind of go around and tell our story and all. And he told one that's stuck with me ever since. It was from Matthew 28:19. Mm-hmm. Talking about when Jesus gave the Great Commission before he ascended. He told them to go to all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, all that good stuff. But the part that stuck out was that first word was go. And that was his point, was Jesus told his own disciples, go, don't wait for them to come to you. Yeah. And we have that same commission of God today is it would be super easy and comfortable for us to sit in church and expect all the lost people to come to us to get saved. But that's not what we're called to do. We're called to go into the thorny places where it's not easy to sow the seed. Because I imagine the sower, if he went in stony places, I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt and say he wasn't barefooted. But sandals in those days probably weren't the most comfortable, so it probably wasn't easy walking. It says they went through the place and fell among thorns. So for it to fall among thorns, he had to be out in the thorns strowing the seed. And, you know, we talked about this morning at church about the outreach that the church does and the food boxes and all. I mean, we can go to the people around here who's got tons of money and tons of food and give them free food. But what have we accomplished? It's the ones who need it.
Yes.
And Paul, to me, this has always been one of my favorite scriptures in 2 Corinthians, where he told them, he said, if your gospel is hid, it's hid to those that are lost.
Yes.
It's easy to witness to, you know, your cousin who's a pastor of the church and say, oh, God's been so good. Let me tell you what all he's done for me. Versus the one who, and I think this is where we as a church in general are guilty of being too judgmental at times. When you go to the one who smells funny, or you go to the one who's got on the nasty clothes, looks like that, bathed in a month, or you see the one that's tatted up, earrings, and you know the biker leather on and all. We kind of shy away because they need the same Jesus we need.
You pull off the interstate, or you go to one of the big cities, or even here, you get off the interstate in Attala.
Yeah.
Somebody homeless standing on the side of the road for a sign for food, money, whatever it is. And then instead of how can I help them, the thought will trudge through there. Well, I wonder what they did to get in that shape.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just bad things happen to good people.
That's true.
They fall in hard times. Yes.
I know I don't really know your history, but I know mine, and I know had I not got saved where I was, and if I were still alive, where I would probably be today. And it's easy, I think, sometimes for us, once we've been churched and in the way a little while, to forget where we've come from. And I've been guilty of that at times. And I think that's a very dangerous place to get, because just because we're saved doesn't make us any better than anybody else. God doesn't love me any more now than he did when I was lost. He doesn't love me because I'm saved any more than he does the drunk that's out under the bridge in Birmingham that's homeless or what. The love's unconditional, the love's there. And you can get, I think that was the problem with the Pharisees. They were high and mighty, and if you don't keep yourself grounded, you get high and mighty and want to hold your seed to the ones you think are deserving of the seed.
The ones that are worthy.
Yeah. And that's not who Jesus came to die for. If he came to die just for the worthy, he would stay in heaven, because none of us are worthy. So what all of our righteousness, all mine, yours, the Pope's, everybody's, is just filthy rags.
And Jesus came. He came to save sinners. He came to seek and save that which was lost. But he didn't start it. Whenever he started calling his group of men that he was going to go to spiritual battle with, he didn't go to the Pharisees. He didn't go to the scribes. He didn't go to the synagogue. He went out and found some fishermen, tax collector, politician. So like he found people of the everyday walk, and he changed them into who he saw their potential.
Right.
Instead of the obstacles, instead of their failures that he knew would happen, he still saw their potential. And oftentimes we look at people's failures, or we look at their past, their history, or we want to get their pedigree. If he would have wanted a pedigree, he would have went to the synagogue. He would have went to, Gamaliel, or to one of those teachers that were just high ranking in Judaism, but he didn't. He went to the everyday people because he didn't care about the pedigree. He qualified those that he called. Right. Instead of looking, oftentimes we want to wait until we're qualified to try to witness to somebody or to try to talk to them, instead of just speaking what the Lord's laid on your heart.
That, and we want to do the qualifying before we bring somebody in or try to bring somebody in, because we think that's, I don't know, I guess sometimes we think that's what we're supposed to do, but it's not. It's like the sower's job is to plant the seed. We can't make it grow.
Okay.
We've got to plant it though.
You can try to prepare the
Yeah, you
ground.
can do all you can do.
You can till the ground, you can pray for them, but yeah.
That's like I've told a story a couple times at work about a guy. I don't know if you're ever down Alabama City way much or not. There's a guy, and I see him quite often. It's been a year or two since I did this. Me and Ashley at one time had made up these bags, and I kept a few in my truck that had like gloves and crackers and a bottle of water and stuff like that. And I think I had like a little seizure card that somebody gave me. I stuck down in the bag and all, but I always had a Bible. And this guy, you see him walking everywhere in Alabama City, and I'm 99.9% sure he's homeless because I see him everywhere. And I stopped and I tried to give him that bag, and I think he saw the Bible. And I don't know that it was so much the Bible itself as it was he didn't want whatever I was going to try to push on him. And I wouldn't try. I just want to give him the bag. I'm like, hey, you look like you could use what's in here.
Like you need.
Yeah, you need what's in here more than I need what's in this bag.
Right.
Just here it is. No strings attached. I ain't saying get in the truck with me and you got to listen to a 30-minute sermon. You ain't got to go to church with me. We ain't got to do nothing. I just want to hand you this. And he wouldn't take it. And at first I was kind of like, goodness, why wouldn't you want this? And then, over time, as I've thought about that situation, it's one of those where I'm like, it's not my job to force it on him. And if he don't want to take it, that's let God deal with that later, whatever his situation is. But I got to do my part, which is awful.
Yes.
And I think we failed to do that. Mama, one time, I'm sure you're too young to remember this place, but on Broad Street, there used to be a Jack's. Do you remember that? Okay. Close. There used to be like the DHR building used to be on Broad Street. There was a Jack's there, close to Baker Tower end of Broad Street. And I think she had paid like her power bill or renewed her tap, whatever it was. There was a guy that had a sign that said, we're working for food, whatnot. She drove through Jack's because she had that skip. And we do have to be careful. I mean, not everybody's good intentions.
Right.
But instead of just handing him money, she went through Jack's and said, we'll work for food. So apparently he's hungry. Bought him a combo, gave it to him, and he got just totally ticked off, hollered at her and all this good stuff. But it's where you do it from. If you take it, throw it down, stomp on it, whatever. But if our intent is there, like you said, if we're prayerful about it, if we're got the right intentions behind the seed that we're trying to sow, we just got to do our part, though. And it takes faith too, because sometimes we might go out into sow a field that we never expected to be in, or we go out. And I thought of Abraham and read up on him some when God told him to leave his family, leave his country, leave everything. He didn't tell him where he was sending. He just said go. Mm-hmm. And because of Abraham's faith, he ends up in the Hall of Faith over in Hebrews. Mm-hmm. Because that faith is what justified him, not the work he did, but faith is. And we gotta have some faith to sow seeds too. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, it's not gonna make you rich going out and sharing the gospel. Rich on earth in man's eyes, but rich in heaven in God's eyes, because that's what we're called to do.
So I think there will if you think about how much weight can be tied to just sharing once, or to one person, to the right person. Billy Graham is looked at as, the preacher of this century, or hundreds of years have we seen a preacher like Billy Graham, moves like Billy Graham. But it's in the kingdom, is he more important, or is the guy at the shoe store that told him about the revival that was coming to town, or he gave his life to Christ? It's the man could have said, well, I'm just an old shoe salesman, I haven't got any business trying to peddle, but if we're just faithful with our seeds, my seed may not bring forth as much as yours, or yours as much as mine. But
It
we
says
never
that,
know. Some 30, some 60, some 100-fold. But we never know what seed that is that we're going to sow that really to who that's going to, it's, there's some people that get in church and they'll keep a foot in church the rest of their life. But then there's some, whenever they get to walking with the Lord, they hit the ground running and they don't look back. They're doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
But not every seed, I guess, is created equal. And it's not ours to judge whether that seed that we're going to sow is worthy of our time or not. We're supposed to do the sowing. We're supposed to put the seed out there.
Well, you said Billy Graham, and everybody, like when you think of the evangelical, he's way up here, and everybody else is way down here. But you never think somebody sowed that original seed in Billy Graham's life.
Yes.
Who's to say that you're not holding the seed that's supposed to be sowed in the next Billy Graham's life?
That's right.
And it's not about, Brad or Jeremy sowed the seed that brought in the next Billy. Because when we get to heaven, we're not going to look back and have a tally mark board behind us of, ooh, you sowed more seed, or you had more people respond to you than this person. It's God that does all that. We're just a vessel, and we have to be willing to be used.
We have to be willing messengers, or willing, whatever it is in the moment, what we're willing to do. And sometimes it's not even, that day may not even be to share the word with them. That day it may just be a friend to them. Yeah. To start, what they're hungry and they got a sign. Is stopping and getting them something to eat and bringing it, and then you see them a week later, bring them something else, and then you develop that relationship with them where they feel like, hey, he's not just shoving something down my throat. Right. He's not trying to, like that man that you tried to give that bag to. If he saw that Bible, maybe somebody else sat him down, told him if he wasn't just an old sinner, if you hadn't done this, or if you hadn't done, what did you do to get in this shape? Right. He may have been looked down on by the church, or maybe he went to a church or a church member that he thought would help him out in his time of need. And then they went to pointing fingers and turned him away. I know that's a lot of speculation, but
I think it's got some biblical base too, because that was what the Pharisees were trying to catch Jesus up on when he healed the blind guy on a Sunday. Was like that. Their first question was, whose sin that made this guy blind? His parents or him? And his point was, in Jeremy language, Jesus was saying, dude, it don't really matter which one of them sinned. He was blind and now he sees. Look at what just happened here. And they were too caught up on did he deserve that? Or
but it was for the glory of God.
Yeah. It was Sunday and you can't do that. They were too tied up on all the political and social and all of that. And that's totally opposite of what Jesus came to do. That's totally opposite of what we've been called to do as followers of Christ.
We're called to be a set apart people. And a lot of times we want
not a set above people.
Yeah, we want to create our holy huddle, and for a season, I will say there were certain friends that I had as a worldly man before I came to know Jesus as my Lord and Savior. There were people that whenever I came to have a relationship with Jesus, that I had to push back from because I was too immature in my walk. I was too young, and I knew that if I kept running around with them, I was going to stumble and fall. Right. So there was a time and a season that I had to push back, that I couldn't be around them, because I knew what was right, and I knew what I would do if I was with him. There was a time when I had to put up walls in that sense, but now I could go hang out with those people. Now I'm not going to do the things they do, but I'm strong enough in my walk now that I'm not going to be swayed, that I'm not scared if I were to go hang out with those people that I'm going to fall.
Right.
And we've got to be mindful of that. We are a people that's supposed to be set apart, but like you said, not set above. But there are times that we do have to pull ourselves away from certain groups to grow ourselves until we're strong enough to withstand in that group.
Yeah,
But Jesus, he didn't hang out with the righteous, religious. He found the low down, dirty sinners. If you, even the scribes and Pharisees says, why is he eating and drinking with the sinners? Why is he not at our table? Why is he down there with the losers?
well, like Mary Magdalene. I mean, one, you're hanging out and you have, a follower who was possessed with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so yeah, but even back in those days, it's like you're like a woman hang out with you. It's like, yeah. We have to. I think we have to be careful. So I do believe that we're called to sow the entire field, not just the rows we want to sow, not just the corners and sides. Not to put our seed, like here's the whole field, the sun's over here, and we know it's going to grow good over here. Let's just go over there and plant and leave the rest of it dirt. That's not what we're called to do.
Or even if we sow, if you go further than that, okay, we're going to sow it, but I'm going to keep a bunch of it in the sack.
Yeah.
For if we don't sow the seed because we're not certain if the ground's going to be good enough, or we're not certain that it's going to get the water it needs, we're not certain that it's going to get the sunlight it needs, we're not certain that it's going to get the attention it needs, it's not ever going to grow.
That's right.
Sitting in that sack. It's not ever going to grow. If you never put it out there, you can set it on a shelf for years and years and years, and you've just got a seed that's going to go bad that could have been sown.
It's like
you missed opportunity.
My granddad, and he passed away a few years ago. When Y2K was coming, he flipped out, and he was funny. But anyway, he built some shelves in his bedroom and had canned food up there that sat until it was out of date and nobody could eat it. So what's the point of having it? You can't use it now. Mm-hmm. He went out because you're not going to be able to get gas. So we had 55-gallon drums in his house with gasoline in it. That if you put in the car now, it's just going to lock the motor up because it's no good. Yeah, and that's what we can do with our witness by holding it. Is we talk about a key to the service. Mm-hmm. If you've got it and all you're going to do is sit on it and hold it, it's not going to do anybody else any good. It's not going to do you any good either. Because it'll sit and spoil. I mean, my granddad had gobs of gas that people would probably love to have now because they probably pay like 99 cents a gallon for it. But it's not going to run the car. Right. Because it's spoiled. It's went bad. And same with your seed. If you don't plant it, one, it ain't going to grow, and two, it's going to waste. And we're not called to. What did the one guy, the three guys that were given the talents of gold or whatever, one went out and doubled it, the other one went out and doubled it, and one was like, yeah, I'm going to hide it. That way when you come back, I'll give you back what you had, and you hadn't lost any. Yeah, but you hadn't gained any either. Right. Kind of like the horrible example, but kind of like I was told the stock market, to make money, they said you got to risk it to get the biscuit. And yeah, you do. Spiritually, we've got to put ourselves at risk sometimes of being made fun of or failing, but we're failing for the right reason. Right. We've got to put it out there. Not everybody's going to accept it. Even Jesus, he was rejected of his own people. Yes. But he didn't say, okay, and he knew that was going to happen, but he didn't say, okay, I know this is going to happen, so I'm not going to waste my time. Yeah, no, he still put it out there, and we've got to still put our gospel out there and share what God's done, regardless of what the outcome is going to be, because if we don't, nothing's going to happen. Right. And as you're talking about, I started thinking about the rich young ruler that came to him, and Jesus was talking to him. He asked him, what must he do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus told him to honor your father and mother, he named off several of the commandments: don't kill, don't steal, do these things. And the rich young ruler said, well, all of these things I've kept from my youth. And Jesus said, well, this one thing you lack, sell all that you have and give it to the poor. It would hurt. Yeah, and he did. He said he went away with a sorrowful heart because he had great possessions. But you don't see where Jesus ran after him. We don't see a follow-up. And who's to say that
Jesus really wanted him to sell all those things, just like Abraham or Abram at the time. He wanted to see his heart.
Right.
He told him to go up and sacrifice Isaac. And he wanted to see his heart, and for Abram to see what he was going to do. He got the wood, he got it together, he went up the mountain, he had the fire, he was ready, he put Isaac on the altar, and as he was about to plunge the knife in, the Lord said, "Hey, Abraham, oh, we see that you're not withholding anything from God." Who's to say that he wouldn't have said that to the rich young ruler if he said, "Okay, let's go put the estate on sale"? Maybe he would have said, "Nah, man, look, we're going to come to you. You're going to fund this mission trip. Like if you're willing, you want to roll with us. Hey, we need somebody that's got some money, but I just want to make sure you didn't love it more than me."
Right.
But we never see where the rich young ruler just left sorrowfully because he had great possessions.
I don't think God wants us to do without.
No,
He even told us they came to give us life and give it more abundantly. But when it's given abundantly, we're expected to use it abundantly too.
Yes.
Not just sit back and hoard all the blessings God gives us.
Yeah, we oftentimes claim, our blessings, when in reality, most of the blessings that we have, we would be better off without them, because they're just burdens. They get in the way of the Lord. They get in the way of doing what we should do. I don't even know where I was going with that. Yeah.
Well, that was pretty good. I enjoyed that. I think there's a lot to that. What, 9 verses?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I find when you sit down and put time. And I think that's why I'm glad you were eager to do this with me, because I've done these before by myself and I get a blessing out of them. But when you can talk to somebody else and see other people's input and things, you can take one verse and there's just so much packed in here.
Yeah.
And what I like the most about it is we could do this exact same thing next time and get something totally different.
Absolutely. Because the word of God is alive.
Yeah.
And it speaks into the season that you're in. And it's not that the word doesn't change, but with it being living, it can adapt
Where you're at,
Yeah.
what you need. Yeah.
to work. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I enjoyed that. Really did.
What are you thinking next time?
I don't know. I think we'll
let you know what we think.
we'll let you know next go around. Maybe we'll drag some other folks in here before long. Throw them under the bus.
Yeah.
We'll come up with all the questions. Maybe get a snake and throw at them, or
I'm out
sprinkle.
on
Yeah, I'm out on snake.
snake handling day. I'm out.
I'm out on that one. Well, I enjoyed that. Hopefully somebody got something out of it. And if not, I did. So, all right. Signing off for Jeremy and B Rad.
Yeah.
See you next go round.